Let's talk about the Roman Empire. This ancient civilization has left an indelible mark on history, influencing countless aspects of modern life. From architecture to governance, the legacy of Rome is all around us. Just the name makes you think of power and grandeur. The Roman Empire wasn't just a political entity, it was a cultural and technological powerhouse that set the stage for the development of Western civilization. It's a story about what humans can achieve. A civilization that started small but grew to be a giant on the world stage. The Romans were masters of engineering, creating roads, aqueducts and buildings that have stood the test of time. For centuries, Rome controlled the destiny of entire nations. Its military might was unparalleled, and its political system, though complex, allowed for a level of organization and control that was unprecedented. Its power stretched from the sunny coasts of North Africa to the foggy lands of Britain. This vast expanse allowed for a rich exchange of cultures, ideas, and goods, making Rome a melting pot of the ancient world. At its peak, the Roman Empire was enormous. It was a marvel of administrative efficiency, with a network of roads and communication lines that connected its far-flung territories. It covered a huge chunk of the known world, across 3 continents. The sheer scale of the empire is a testament to the ambition and ingenuity of the Romans. We're talking over 2 million square miles, with somewhere between 50 and 90 million people living in it. This diverse population contributed to the rich tapestry of Roman life, bringing different customs, languages, and traditions into the fold. This wasn't just any empire, it was a force of nature that shaped Western civilization. The innovations in law, politics, and engineering that came out of Rome have had a lasting impact on the world, but just like all empires, Rome couldn't rule forever. The seeds of its decline were sown in the very elements that made it great. The same things that made it great, ambition, a strong military, and a desire for conquest, would also lead to its downfall. Internal strife, economic troubles, and external pressures all played a role in the empire's eventual collapse. In this video, we're diving deep into the reasons behind the fall of the Roman Empire. We'll explore the complex web of factors that led to the end of one of history's greatest civilizations. It's a story full of excitement and a warning for powerful nations today. The rise and fall of Rome offer valuable lessons about the dangers of overreach and the importance of adaptability. You see, in the ruins of Rome, we find more than just broken stones and dust. We find echoes of a civilization that once dominated the known world and insights into the human condition. We find important lessons for the superpowers of our time. The story of Rome is a reminder that even the mightiest empires can fall, and that the true measure of a civilization is not just in its conquests, but in its contributions to humanity. To understand why Rome fell, we first need to understand how amazing it was at its peak. The Roman Empire wasn't just about military power, though they had plenty of that. This was a civilization that was amazing at engineering, governing, and culture. They left a mark on the world that we still see today. Roman engineers were famous in the ancient world for being incredibly smart. They built a network of roads that stretched for over 250,000 miles, connecting the farthest corners of the empire. These roads were built to last, and they made trade, communication, and moving armies much easier. And don't even get me started on Roman architecture. The Colosseum, a building so incredible that it could fit 50,000 people, still stands today as proof of how clever the Romans were. They built aqueducts that brought fresh water to cities miles away, keeping everyone healthy. These incredible feats of engineering weren't just useful, they showed the world just how powerful and advanced Rome was. Even with all its glory, the Roman Empire had money problems. These issues were not just minor inconveniences, but were deeply rooted in the very fabric of Roman society and governance. These financial struggles are often forgotten when we hear stories about Roman battles and politics, but they were just as significant. The grandeur of the Roman legions and the political machinations of the Senate often overshadow the economic realities that were brewing beneath the surface. These economic troubles played a big part in the empire's decline. The ruins we see today are not just remnants of a glorious past, but also silent witnesses to the economic turmoil that contributed to Rome's downfall. One of the biggest problems was inflation. This wasn't a sudden issue, but a gradual process that eroded the value of Roman currency over time. Imagine things getting more expensive every day. That's inflation, and it makes your money worth less. For the average Roman citizen, this meant that their daily lives became increasingly difficult as their purchasing power diminished. As the Roman Empire grew, all the gold and silver they took from conquered lands actually made their own money less valuable. This influx of precious metals initially seemed like a boon, but eventually led to a devaluation of their currency. This, along with the rising cost of everything, created a bad situation where the poor and working class suffered the most. The wealth gap widened and social tensions increased as the rich became richer and the poor struggled to make ends meet. Another big issue was that Rome relied too much on slaves. This reliance on slave labor was a double-edged sword that initially boosted the economy but eventually led to its stagnation. They got these slaves from the places they conquered, and these slaves did almost all the farming and manufacturing work. This system worked well as long as Rome continued to expand and conquer new territories. At first this seemed great for the economy, but it wasn't going to last. The over-reliance on slave labor meant that there was little incentive to innovate or improve agricultural and manufacturing techniques. As Rome conquered fewer places, they got fewer slaves. This decline in the number of slaves led to a labor shortage, which had a ripple effect throughout the economy. This led to not having enough workers and everything costing more. The scarcity of labor drove up wages, which in turn increased the cost of goods and services, exacerbating the inflation problem. Plus, because they relied so much on slaves, there was no reason to invent new tools or technology to make work easier. This lack of innovation meant that Roman agriculture and industry remained stagnant, unable to adapt to changing circumstances. The economic troubles of Rome were complex and multifaceted, involving a combination of inflation, over-reliance on slave labor, and a lack of innovation. These issues, often overshadowed by tales of military conquest and political intrigue, played a crucial role in the eventual decline of one of history's greatest empires. Section 4. The scary instability, political upheavals. While money problems were chipping away at Rome's power, political instability was shaking the empire to its core. The government, once strong and steady with great leaders, fell into chaos and scheming. The first sign of trouble was the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC. Caesar's death marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. But it also started a time of political violence and instability that would last for centuries. The change from a republic to an empire meant a big shift in who had power. The emperor, a position that was supposed to be temporary, became more and more powerful. This attracted ambitious and ruthless people who wanted that power for themselves. Power struggles, overthrows, and assassinations became common as emperors rose and fell quickly. This instability at the top of the government trickled down, making people lose trust in their leaders and weakening the empire from the inside. Section 5. A house divided, internal strife. As Rome struggled with money problems and a shaky government, fights within the empire made things even worse. The Roman people, once united with a shared identity and purpose, became divided and disillusioned. One of the biggest reasons for this internal fighting was the growing gap between the rich and the poor. While the wealthy elite were getting richer through conquest, trade, and owning land, most people were struggling to survive. This difference in wealth led to anger, riots, and a loss of pride in being Roman. To make matters worse, there were religious and cultural tensions too. The Roman Empire, which was once accepting of different religions and cultures, became less tolerant as Christianity became more popular. The persecution of Christians, who were seen as a threat to traditional Roman values, created even more division and made people question Rome's morals. Roman society, now filled with inequality, unrest, and religious intolerance, was not ready for the dangers that were coming from outside. Section 6. The barbarian tide, external threats. While internal problems were weakening the Roman Empire from within, threats from outside were ready to shatter it completely. The once invincible Roman Empire, which had stood tall for centuries, was now facing an unprecedented wave of invasions. For centuries, Rome had defended itself against its enemies. The Roman legions, known for their discipline and strength, had successfully repelled countless invasions. Their legions were a powerful force that kept invaders away. The sight of Roman soldiers marching in unison was enough to deter many would-be attackers. But as the empire weakened, its borders became like a leaky sieve, no longer able to hold back the tide of invaders. The once formidable fortifications were now crumbling, and the defenses that had protected Rome for so long were failing, allowing new enemies to test their defenses. These invaders were relentless, probing for weaknesses and exploiting every opportunity to breach the Roman lines. Among the most dangerous of these new enemies were the Germanic tribes, fierce warriors who were determined to carve out their own territories from the Roman lands, who the Romans called barbarians. These tribes were not just raiders, they were organized and strategic, posing a significant threat to the stability of the empire. These tribes were moving because of different reasons, driven by a combination of factors including climate change, population pressures, and the movement of other tribes, like not having enough land to sustain their growing populations. The scarcity of resources forced them to seek new territories, often at the expense of the Roman Empire, and being pushed west by the Huns. The Huns, a nomadic group from Central Asia, were themselves a formidable force, driving other tribes before them and creating a domino effect of migrations and invasions. They started putting a lot of pressure on Rome's borders. The relentless pressure from these migrating tribes strained the Roman defenses to their breaking point. The Goths, Vandals, and Huns, among others, were relentless in their attacks, each group seeking to exploit the weakening Roman state for their own gain. Started raiding Roman territory more and more. These raids were not just military incursions, they were devastating assaults that left towns and villages in ruins. They attacked cities and villages, spreading fear and chaos throughout the empire. The once secure heartlands of Rome were now vulnerable to these barbarian onslaughts, making the empire look weak. The destruction left in the wake of these attacks was a stark reminder of Rome's declining power. The Roman army, once the pride of the empire, was now struggling to maintain its former glory. The legions were overstretched, fighting on multiple fronts, and unable to mount an effective defense, was stretched too thin and couldn't keep up with all these attacks. The sheer number of enemies and the frequency of their assaults overwhelmed the Roman military. The once mighty Roman Empire, weakened by internal struggles, was now facing an existential threat. The internal conflicts and political instability only exacerbated the situation. And facing attacks from all sides, the empire was besieged on multiple fronts. The coordinated invasions from various barbarian groups created a perfect storm of destruction, was on the verge of collapse. The fall of Rome was not a sudden event, but a gradual decline, hastened by the relentless external threats that it could no longer fend off.